where should people start? Even because I'm sure a lot of people don't even recognize that is what's causing their issues. They just figure out
Yeah.
they can't get that high paying job because their boss is against them, and life's not fair. Or of course, insert excuse here, and excuse me, insert reason here. It's one of those things where
Yeah.
people really start to, I think, do some of that inner work.
Yeah. So you brought up a really good point because a lot of times when we're not able to move forward, our brain has a way of making it seem like the problem is external. It's because my boss is this way, or this work is too hard, or a number of other things. And we can actually get upset at the world because the world is not giving us what we want. When reality, a lot of it is happening internal. So a lot of our resistance are internal, but it can make it seem like it's external. So to answer your question, the best place to start is to understand wherever our struggles or challenges is, it's not likely the external world. It's something that's going on internally.
Join me, Jeremy Swick, on Into the Unknown, a podcast that delves into the personal journeys, stories, and experiences of individuals across diverse professions. As a historian by trade, I firmly believe that our personal histories shape our present and offer valuable insights into our paths ahead. With that being said, let's get into it. On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with a very special guest, Kam Knight. How are you doing today, Kam?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited we can make this work. Where are you calling in from?
So I'm here in North Carolina. I actually was traveling a few days ago and my flight got canceled twice. So we were dealing with the winter storms. And then now, luckily, a lot of it has subsided. So that's great.
I love to hear it. So, I'd like to talk about the importance of networking. How are we connected, Cam?
We are connected through Facebook, I believe.
Yes, it's one of those things. I love the idea. I know social media sometimes gets a bad rap, and of course, there are places where it isn't great, but those podcasting communities are absolutely incredible because people have so many unique
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, I think social media can be great if a person uses it to their advantage. And what I mean by that is, I'm not somebody who is on social media, though I do see the value in it because as an entrepreneur, there are a lot of people that a person can connect with very easily from really not just your hometown, but outside your state, country, and even the whole world. And I'm not one to be on social media scrolling, watching videos and things like that. In fact, I don't really even do much social media promotions. I have my VA handle it, but I know for that one-on-one and the connections and building relationships, it does help. So I'm on it for those purposes where it accelerates my networking as opposed to actually being a detriment. And another way a person can utilize it in healthy ways is there are actually a lot of extensions that you can add to your phone and browser that remove all the distractions from social media. So when I open up YouTube, there's nothing on the screen but a search bar to allow me to search for the video I'm seeking. And you can also do that with Facebook. You can add an extension that removes the feed. So when you go to Facebook, you can just kind of go to your messages and talk to the people that either you're connecting with or networking with without having to see the stories and things that might normally take us away.
Cam, I appreciate you mentioning that because I think there are so many things like that, like extensions, that you can really create and tailor your social media experience to focus on what you really find valuable.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll give a really quick example. I mentioned I go on YouTube. Well, there's really no need for me to go on YouTube because there's not really much networking on YouTube. But I have recently taken up salsa and bachata, and I really enjoy it, and it helps to practice. So I try to practice every morning, and it helps to practice to the songs. So I'll go to YouTube and look for certain mixes that I want to practice a dance with. And normally, if I had YouTube, I would open it up and there'd be all these recommendations and all these other things and comments and all of that. But now that I downloaded this extension, It literally removes everything. And so I can open it, I can go to the specific video I want. There's no other recommendations, nothing. I've even removed the contents. And all that's there is that video that I get to watch. And once I have practiced to the music, then I can close it and then go do something else. And then, like, maybe go open up Facebook to see if I have any messages. Now, when I open up Facebook, I don't have to have all this stuff on my feed that might pull my attention away. I literally can open up Facebook, go to the messages, see who's messaged me, and respond. So there are ways that it can be beneficial.
Cam, I appreciate that so much. I think so much of it because we do get lost in that kind of, I would call it a time suck, where of course you watch that one
Yeah.
salsa video and next thing you know you've watched seven, you haven't practiced it yet, and you need to really start
Yes.
today, and so you miss out on your opportunity there.
Yeah. And when you can remove all the recommendations and all the comments and all the distractions, literally you just have that one video that you initially intended to go to that site to see, and you see it and you can leave much more easily versus the alternative, which you mentioned, seeing 10 other videos and then not even getting started.
I want to know a little bit more about you, that origin story. Who's Cam?
Yeah, sure. So I'll first start by saying who I am, and then I'll talk about how I got here. My name is Kam Knight. I'm a coach, international author, or international speaker, and author of a dozen books, many of which you see behind me, in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance that have sold over 500,000 copies and have over 10,000 ratings on Amazon. Now, I talk about a technique, or I talk about a concept called internal resistance, which answers a question I had my whole life. And that is, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can't or don't do it? What I realize is that there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back and is actively working to hold us back. And I call this part resistance. And it's this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it. And so, how I came to this topic really started off when I was young and I moved to the US. I had parents who had high expectations and low support. One, and because they had low support, they weren't really around to raise me. Like, they were physically around, but not in a way that could help my development, especially coming into a vastly different country and culture. So, in order to understand what was going around, I turned to television. And in many ways, I grew up on television. And the conclusion my mind made, and this is the second part of the thing, is that it was all about the external. It was all about having a nice car, big house, a lot of money in my bank account, prestigious job, and all of that. So from a very young age, I had a lot of wants and desires, though I couldn't always get started on things or make progress. In fact, when I was in high school, I worked hard because I wanted to get into an Ivy League school. Although I get into a decent college, I use the backdoor method. And that means you apply for a easy major, and then once you get into the school, you switch to a more difficult major. And in college, I wanted to graduate to work for a big firm, big accounting firm or investment firm. And like with my Ivy League school, that didn't happen. And although I got a decent job, this was more or less the pattern in my life. I had a lot of aspirations, and I either missed the mark, fell short, or achieving it was much more difficult and stressful than it needed to be. And I wondered why that was. Why is it if I want to do something and I know what to do and I have the motivation to do it, but for one reason or another, I don't do it? The progress is slow. I sabotage myself before getting to the end, or oftentimes I don't do it. And that question kind of lingered in my mind for most of my young adult life. And unfortunately, there weren't a lot of good answers out there. The best answers I was hearing was, you need to have positive beliefs, or you need to have motivation and discipline. And those are part of the equation, but I felt like they were just pieces to a much bigger puzzle. And so the more books I read, coaching I did, and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human mind. And at a certain point, I had this epiphany or aha moment where I was like, wait a minute, there's a part of our brain designed to hold us back. There's a part of our mind built to keep us from growing. And like I say, I call this part resistance. And it is that brick wall that holds us back when we want to do something, but we can't. So that more or less is kind of how I got to this point.
Kim, as you mentioned with the resistance, and that's part of your mind, through your studies and research, why is that in place? Why is that brick wall in place in our minds?
Yeah. So to really understand the answer, it helps to understand that the part of the brain that creates wants works separately from the part that actually allows us to act on that want. Now, this is really key, so I'll say it one more time. The part of the brain that creates desires works independent of the part that actually allows us to act on that desire. So we have a part of the brain that's creating wants, and in many ways, it's creating endless wants one after another. It doesn't check to see if a want is worth pursuing or going after. Its only job is to create wants. And as many people have experienced, they have all sorts of wants pulling them in all sorts of directions. And oftentimes our wants can be very conflicting and things of that nature. And then we have this other part of the brain that checks to see if that want is worth pursuing or going after. And if this part doesn't give the green light, then we can't act. So what's really important to understand is that it's possible for both the brain to create a desire for something and keep us from going after it. And I'm sure you and your listeners have experienced moments where you kind of wanted something, but weren't able to go after it, or wanted something else, or there was this tug of war going on. Well, that happens because the wanting mechanism works separate from the part that actually allows us to act on that want, which I call resistance. Now, this part, when it does evaluate a want, a desire, an option, or course of action, it goes through a whole host of criterias to see if you should do it. And if the decision is not in line with any of the criterias, it will prevent action. So, a great analogy for this is thinking about standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision that comes up must go through them. If even one of the members is against the idea, it will not pass. So, what's really important to understand is that both parts can actually get in the way. The parts that create wants can get in the way, and so can the part that creates resistance. So, how can the part that create wants get in the way? Well, one, since our wanting mechanism is unrestrained, it's not checking to see if the want that it's creating conflicts with another want. It doesn't check to see if the wants that it's creating, we actually have the time or energy for. It's just kind of creating wants all the time. And it's easy to get lost in all the different wants or get caught in conflicting wants and not be able to move forward in any of them because we're just kind of almost like deer in headlights, not knowing where to go. Now, even though we can narrow in on one want and cut out all the rest, we still have to go through resistance. So, what are the criteria that resistance checks? Well, it's kind of a lot of stuff. It looks at your beliefs. Do you believe that what you're trying to do is possible? You might think it's possible, but do you believe it's possible for you? And if it's not, the brain will prevent action. But it goes even deeper. It goes into our identity, our self image, our authority issues, even concepts like core needs. And so the more criterias that resistance pushes up against, the harder it is to do that thing. I hope it made sense because I know in my head it makes perfect sense. And when I try to explain it, often people get it, but sometimes it can be a miss. So let me know.
No, Kim, that was an excellent explanation because I think, as you mentioned, there are those different parts of the brain, the want versus the actual need. And of course, I think a
Yeah.
lot of what you're looking at is the rewiring of how your brain kind of attacks problems or creates solutions.
Yeah, exactly. So I do want to kind of give an example of r- how, some of the criteria is because I know I listed off a bunch of things. And to a person who may not understand resistance or the words identity or self image, they might not actually know what that means. I'll kind of talk about authority issues first. So, authority issues relate to our unconsciously held attitudes toward authority figures such as parents, principals, priests, police officers, and even personal development coaches like ourselves. And I'm going to extend that definition to anyone who tells you or makes you feel obligated to do something. So, when we're growing up, if we're around people who are always telling us what to do, what not to do, how to do it, and how not to do it, at a certain point, the brain gets fed up and doesn't want to listen to or take advice from anyone. Even when we grow up and want to do those things because it'll be helpful, it'll be good for our health, or it could help us bring financial security, the authority issue response will kick in and keep us from doing it. And so that's one of the reasons resistance will arise is if at a certain point we got fed up with everyone telling us what to do, even when we want to do those things at a certain point, we can't do it because resistance is saying, no, we're not going to do it. We want to piss off all the people who told us why or told us that we should be doing this thing. When I talk about core needs, what I mean is that as humans, we are built with all sorts of needs, like the need for attention, affection, and physical contact. And some of these needs are deeply ingrained into us, like the need for a mother's love or a father's guidance. Now, if these needs aren't met, it creates pain, a lot of pain, the kind of pain that can make a person go crazy. So, if a person is growing up and their brain comes to the conclusion that these needs can't be met, won't be met, or is too dangerous to be met, their brain will prevent them from going after it. Makes sense, right? But because these are core needs, they don't go away, they just get louder and stronger. But since the brain feels the need can't be met, it feels it has no other choice but to distract us from that need. And there's many ways that it'll distract us. Some of them include things like television, social media, video games, and even drinking and alcohol. And I think many listeners probably can resonate with that. But oftentimes, our brain will make our lives difficult where we can't finish anything we start. So the focus is always on problems and not the pain. So I'll give a really quick story to illustrate what I mean by core needs. I knew someone who wanted nothing more than the love of his dad, but his dad never gave it to him, and it hurt him a lot. So much so that he lived a hectic lifestyle, living from paycheck to paycheck, never being able to make ends meet. The reason his brain did that is because it felt like it could never receive the dad's love. And because the need wasn't going to go away, the brain felt it had no other choice but to distract him from that pain by creating problems in that person's life. So when I say this resistance goes deep, I really mean it. Like a lot of these things aren't being talked about. So when we do hit up against resistance and we're procrastinating and sabotaging, we think that there's something wrong with us or that we just don't have the motivation or discipline, when in reality, we have these deeper things that are at play. And unfortunately, the way resistance works is when it stops you from doing something, it doesn't tell you that it's stopping you or give you a reason. We just find ourselves hitting up against this impenetrable, invisible wall and then wondering what the heck is going on.
So, Kim, out of curiosity, you mentioned a lot of that is deep rooted trauma, deep rooted things that happen throughout your life. Where should people start? Even because I'm sure a lot of people don't even recognize that is what's causing their issues. They just figure out
Yeah.
they can't get that high paying job because their boss is against them and, life's not fair. Or, of course, insert excuse here and excuse me, insert reason here. It's one of those things where can
Yeah.
people really start to, I think, do some of that inner work.
Yeah, so you brought up a really good point because a lot of times when we're not able to move forward, our brain has a way of making it seem like the problem is external. It's because my boss is this way, or this work is too hard, or a number of other things. And we can actually get upset at the world because the world is not giving us what we want. When reality, a lot of it is happening internal. So a lot of our resistance are internal, but it can make it seem like it's external. So to answer your question, the best place to start is to understand wherever our struggles or challenges is, it's not likely the external world. It's something that's going on internally, and it's making it seem like it's the external. That's the first place to start. The second place to start is to understand that most things aren't really hard to do. Like I've done a lot of stuff in my life, some really crazy stuff, some off the wall stuff, some things I thought were really difficult and whatnot. And what I realized is once I got started and built a rhythm for it, it wasn't really that hard. So most things aren't hard. It felt hard because my mind was making it seem like it was going to be hard, it was going to be difficult, it was going to be dangerous, and all that stuff. And so getting started and really sticking with it, I found, oh wow, most of my challenges are internally caused. So meaning, even if things do seem hard, to start doing them and doing them consistently and showing up until the brain can realize, oh, there's not as much danger as I thought to about this, and kind of move forward. Though some of the reasons for resistance, again, are kind of deep and not getting talked about too much. So there's a simple trick that I give people to help them tap into their resistance a little bit better. And that is to create a statement of the outcome that you want and to repeat that statement. For example, let's just say right now we're in the New Year's and people have a lot of fitness goals to become more active, more fit. So they might create a statement: I am healthy and fit. I exercise 3 times a day. And as they start repeating it, I'm healthy and fit. I exercise 3 times a day. Their mind is going to react to that statement. It might say things like, no, you're not. You're not healthy at all. And it'll trigger memories of all the times they have done things that were the opposite of being healthy. And they might even trigger memories from their childhood of when somebody made fun of them or that somebody said something about how they can't do anything right. And all those reactions are signs of the resistance. And so that's a really quick way that a person can start to better understand their resistance. And the reason I use the word better is they might not fully act, get at the root or at a deeper level, because sometimes it helps to work with someone like me one on one who has an understanding of how the unconscious works and how the different responses, what they mean. But that's a good place to start. So, yeah, things of that nature. I was going to say, so if a person is repeating, I am healthy and strong, or I'm healthy and fit, I exercise regularly, some of the other responses might be, you've never stuck with anything in your life. So that's a sign the brain thinks, well, I've never stuck with anything in my life. So how can I stick with this exercise? And now we're understanding that, oh, my brain is creating resistance to exercising because it doesn't believe I could stick with it. So these are the types of things that can come up when we repeat that statement to give us deeper insights into our resistance.
Kim, I appreciate you said that because I think so much of it is that the idea that words and your thoughts have power, especially internally. Where at this point in my life, a lot of it is that resistance, or I call it that roller coaster feeling. And I think now,
Yeah,
years and years of working on it, I kind of get almost excited. Oh, my brain's telling me I can't do this. And it's not because I'm trying to, free base jump off a building and I don't know how.
yeah,
More trying to find ways for me to redirect, or as you mentioned, it doesn't believe, however you interpret that you can do it. So for me, it almost gets
yeah,
exciting when my brain kind of pushes against it a little bit.
yeah. And another good point that you brought up that's worth talking about because so there's an interesting dynamic that goes on between our wants and our resistance. And oftentimes when we want something and resistance comes up and says, no, you can't have it, it makes a want grow And so we want it even more. And what's really crazy is when we want it more, resistance will kick in even harder, saying, no, you can't have it. So we'll want it even more, and then it'll kick in even harder. And very quickly, this will become a feedback loop or runaway process where all of a sudden we want this thing really bad and can't have it really bad. And I think it's really important for people to understand that because a lot of times we go in with something and wanting it really bad, and just by wanting something really bad can trigger a equal amount of resistance. And so sometimes it helps to reduce your want so you can reduce the resistance to make it easier to do. And I know when you were saying it's like you want this and then resistance comes up and then it motivates you to want to go after it more. And that's very healthy. Though there is that side of it where if we're not careful with increasing our want, we can actually be increasing our resistance as well and create a much tougher wall to push through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And my curiosity would be is that, at least in my case, it's kind of through that track record of success. I realize when I kind of put what I want into something, I do eventually see that outcome. I'm wondering if for
Yeah.
people who are just beginning, you definitely, and I'm sure it happens to me all the time as well, but that increased want, increased resistance. Would that be
Mm.
something that would make sense?
Yeah, I think what I described really would play out more for somebody who's starting off. If someone already has a track record, it's a different story. And here's why. What I help people understand is that the way our mind and body works is that we need to develop the muscle for something to be comfortable and easy. And if we haven't developed the muscle for it, it's actually quite hard and painful to do. In fact, it can create enough pain where resistance kicks in and says, oh, there's pain, let me stop it. And resistance doesn't always check to see if a pain is helpful, like healing pain or the pain necessary to build habits. It's sometimes like an on off switch. If there is pain or potential for it, block it. And so, not only do we need to develop the muscle to do things, we need to develop the muscle for starting things. We need to develop the muscle for sticking with things. And then we need to develop the muscle for finishing things. So a lot of people their wanting mechanism triggers a lot of want, but they never start anything. And as a result, they never built the muscle to start. So even when they really want something bad, since they haven't built this muscle for it, they just never start. And then that want really grows, and then it creates equal amounts of resistance. Now, if a person, there are a lot of people who are good at starting with things, but not sticking with it. And so what they need to do is work on sticking with things so they can build a muscle to stick with things. And then some people are good at sticking with things, but they seem to sabotage themselves before getting to the end. And such people have to build a muscle for completing things. And if they haven't built a muscle for completing things, they can have all the discipline, all the motivation, all the coaching, all the right stuff. But right before they get to the end, their mind will sabotage them. And so, to go back to what you're saying, since you have built the muscle for completing things, you're going to have less resistance because your mind has already gone through that process. It knows what it's like and has comfortability with it, and the muscles and you know the alignment is there. So even though resistance might come up, when you do push past it with a stronger want, it doesn't come with that strong of a resistance because it knows that, hey, this is something you can do, you've done it, and whatnot. Whereas a person who hasn't completed things a lot, no matter how important it's going to be to do the next thing, they're going to experience a lot more resistance just because they just don't have the muscle for it. And what I teach people is if you want to build a muscle to complete things, then sometimes, especially in the beginning, it might take all your energy, all your focus, and all your willpower to make sure you get to the finish line. And then the next time it'll be as intense, but slightly easier. Then the next time it'll be a little bit easier and easier. But the first few times, it might require almost everything in you to get to the finish, even though the finish is easy. And I'll give a really great story about this. So, you see two of my books, Speed Reading and Concentration. Those were some of the last books I wrote. And I took on this audacious goal of writing two books at the same time. And they became much bigger than I anticipated. And there were points in my journey of writing those books where I just didn't want to do it anymore because it was taking up all my time, my energy. I wasn't making time for relationships. It was taking a toll on my health. But I could have given up and I didn't because I knew if I gave up now, I'm building the muscle to not finish things. So I took all my might, all my power to work through and finish those two books. And once I did, it became a lot easier to finish other things I started, things that were even bigger endeavors after those books. And what's even more important is pushing through to the end also told my mind that, hey, don't start something unless you can finish it. So my brain wasn't creating as many desires or distracting desires because it learned the hard way that if it's gonna create a desire and I'm gonna stick with it to the end, and it's gonna be painful, that it'll have me think twice before I actually pick something else that's too much of an ordeal. So yeah, this is a really key principle for people to understand. A lot of time resistance comes up just because they haven't built the muscle to either start with things, stick with things, or to complete things. And if they haven't, then they're going to need to put in all their might to train their muscle to start with things, and then all their might to train their muscles to stick with things, and then all their might to train their muscles to get to the finish line.
Cam, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you mentioned it's like building a muscle, which means over time it
Yeah.
doesn't disappear; it might become weaker. One of the things I always think too is going to the gym has pretty much been a pretty regular thing for me since high school. That being said, there are those seasons and moments in time where I'm not able to get to the gym as much, and I kind of know that in the back of my head, hey, we can't go to the gym right now, but it's almost like I would say not thinking about it, but knowing that this season will pass, and once you get back in there it's almost like for me a rejuvenation. I think, of course, for example, with your book, you had an end deadline for that to be completed, whereas things like the
Yeah.
gym, for example, is kind of ever going process. So I think one of the
Yeah.
things with that muscle, it's of course you want to build that muscle as big as you can, but also knowing that since it's a muscle, it will fluctuate throughout your time, if that makes sense.
Another great point. You're bringing some really good points that I don't really get a chance to talk to in the podcast I've been on. So, yeah, when it comes to taking action, we're taking action for two main reasons: to get to a goal or to stick with the routine. And some things have a end, like writing a book. Once you finish the book, it ends. And then some things are lifelong, like exercise. And it's really important to make that distinction because if you come in with the energy and intention of a thing that is routine based, infinite, with the energy and expectation of something that's going to end, a person might come in with too much energy and exhaust themselves early or in the beginning and not stick with it to the end. So with routine things, we have to take a different approach. We can't just, come in with our A game from the onset and expect it to last for the rest of our life. That just doesn't work. So we have to kind of understand that there are going to be times that we fall off, and it's okay because it's life. We can't it's not possible really to stick with something for the rest of your life very consistently, especially in the busy world we're living in. So when we can come with this expectation of I have to take a different approach, and there's going to be things or days where things might fall off and things of that nature, and not to let it destabilize us or throw us off base, then we can stick with the things that we need to do for an extended period, much longer than if we just come with the mindset of there's an end to it.
Kim, I appreciate that. As we wrap up, title of the podcast, Into the Unknown. What are you working on? I know you just finished two books, and I'm sure you have a few more, at least in your mind. But how? What are you working on right now?
Yeah, so right now I made a conscious decision to not work on anything because one of the concepts to the resistance equation is tricks of resistance. As I mentioned, when resistance stops you, it doesn't tell you it's stopping you or give you a reason. Oftentimes it manifests as tricks, meaning if, let's say, a person wanted to write a book, but they have resistance. And so the tricks might show up as they find themselves watching television, going on social media, playing video games, you know, going to the bar. And these are some obvious tricks because when we're doing those things, a part of us knows we should be doing something else, like working on that book. But then there's other more devious tricks, like falling into a pattern of over planning, where we plan everything of what to do and how to do it and the best way to do it. And it's a trick because the more time we spend on planning, the less time we're doing it. And the less time we're doing, resistance wins in keeping us moving forward. And these tricks go deep. So for me, I was working on a lot of different projects. I've written a lot of books and I had developed this concept of internal resistance. I'm also doing this one-on-one work where I help people go into their unconscious so we can do the work in their unconscious mind. And the more I was doing all these different things, the less I was putting myself out there. Because I had resistance to putting myself out there, my brain kept distracting me with all these projects. And so my goal for this year is to really put myself out there more. Hence, I'm going on these podcasts and doing other things, which means to cut out all the other tricks or distractions that were pulling me out of it. So I hope that answers my question. This year, I'm intentional with not having any projects and with more of bringing some of my concepts and ideas and thinking into the world, whether it's with podcasts, workshops, and things of that nature.
Cam, I appreciate that. It's really interesting, and you made a really deep point with the idea that your brain plays those tricks on you. I realize so much
Yeah.
where a lot of my clients or podcasts, either they want to be podcast hosts or they want to be guests. And one of the biggest things is, I guess by in talking with you, it's that development of that muscle of finding things to completion or finishing things to completion.
Yeah.
I would go out and buy all the gear. And then, of course, my next step is I
Yeah.
will start the podcast. What I ran into with the clients is they were so excited. They went out and bought, or I should say, potential clients, they went out and bought the nicest gear. They were excited and they had their scripts, everything lined up. And then the next thing you know, it's crickets. I give them a couple weeks.
Yes.
About a month later, oh yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. I want to be a movie star. I don't know, something I want to do.
Yeah.
I've shifted my focus. And you mentioned in this entire conversation that building that muscle, a lot of times I think it is those tricks because you're like, oh, I'll launch a podcast. That sounds great. And you're more excited about the
Yeah.
planning of it than the actual execution.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm getting at. So I'm glad that you picked up what I meant by the tricks. And this shows up not just with, podcasting, but a person would want to let's go back to the example of the New Year's resolution. A person will be excited about making a commitment to change their health or get fit. And then they'll go out and try to figure out the best clothes to wear, find the best shoes, sign up for the best gym, do all sorts of research, even figure out the best diet and all of that. And they spend all this time on planning and then they'll never put the plan into place. And what's really crazy about the tricks of resistance, they're really cunning because when we put in all this time planning, our resistance will say, you know what? Maybe I'll try this other thing. And then they'll get distracted, and everything that they learned when they were planning on the first endeavor, they start to forget. And then when they start moving forward in the other thing and resistance comes up, they'll be like, you know what? I should have stuck with the exercise. Then they'll come back to the exercise, but because they forgot a lot of what they learned, they'll put all this effort in learning it all over again. And when it's ready, when they're ready to start again, they'll get distracted with something else, And I see this happen all the time. People go from one endeavor to another, making just enough progress to feel like they are being productive. But when it's time to take the next step, they skip to something else, lose everything they learned in the original, and do it over and over and again. Did that make sense? I hope I explained it
No, Cam,
clearly.
absolutely. It's funny you mention that because I always laugh. Usually, the first 2 weeks of the year is when I take my time off from the gym because typically there's so many people going where
Yeah,
my body doesn't mind having that couple weeks, 2, 3 weeks. Because I won't lie, there's the holiday season in there too, and I'm a cook. I'm
yeah,
gonna have my mom's cookies. I'm gonna enjoy, that experience a little bit. But it's funny because by about January 14th, my body hasn't had the gym in a couple weeks, and I'm like excited and ready to get back instead of the prep work. And of course, that
yeah,
happens over a period of long time where you've kind of had those successes and failures. Now it's kind of like my
yeah,
body's excited for those couple weeks off, and then it's really excited to get back in and continue that journey.
yeah. Yeah, and that happens when you've built that habit, it sounds like for as long as that you have. Um, but if a person hadn't, they would take a couple of weeks off, forget a lot of their training, and either have to work to get back everything they learn, and they might feel like, I don't want to put in that effort, and then resistance wins again because it's keeping you from moving forward. So the tricks of resistance is a really important concept that I want people to understand. And it all goes back to when we're not getting the results that we want, we think it's the external world, but it's all happening internally. A part of our brain is designed to hold us back, and it's actively working to hold us back and is doing it with these tricks that make our lives really difficult and annoying and challenging and a struggle. And then we get upset because we can't imagine we're doing it to ourselves. So we get upset at the world when really we are doing it to ourselves, but not necessarily one part of our mind is doing it.
Cam, if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can they find you?
All right, so I've got 3 free guides for everyone who made it this far into the podcast. The first one is called Prompt Engineering for Your Mind. The human brain was the original ChatGPT, and we can prompt it just like ChatGPT to give us answers and solutions. But unlike ChatGPT, it can help us take action on those answers and solutions. So that's the first guide. The second guide is called Build Skills and Habits in Your Sleep. When we work within our unconscious mind, we can actually train and program it to help us take the actions and develop the behaviors we're seeking. And the second guide has a simple technique that will help you do that. And the third guide is on this topic of internal resistance. And we go into additional ways how our wants hinder forward progress, other causes of resistance, as well as some of the other tricks we didn't get a chance to discuss here. And they can get all 3 guides at kamknight.com. That's KAMKNIGHT.com. And if anybody wants to do one-on-one work with me, as I briefly mentioned, I have developed a technique that helps people go into their unconscious. It's not NLP or hypnosis. It goes much deeper to work on their resistance, and it's much more direct and much quicker to overcome the blocks that we're facing. And if anyone's interested in that, they can email me at
Well, Cam, I
coach@kamknight.com.
want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk with me. I learned so much today.
Thank you very much.
That was another fun episode of Into the Unknown. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen. And if it provides you any value or entertainment, I would love if you shared it with others, liked, subscribed, and really just help the podcast grow. Again, tell a friend, tell a foe, just anyone who might enjoy hearing some stories of people's own journeys and what got them to where they are today. Till next time.